Morganite fans, we have a deck for you. And not just a stun deck, but a deck that has a little bit more teeth, so I think you will enjoy. And now we will have a deck list at the end, but starting it piece by piece while the replays are going, we're going to have three of the most important Morganite, and that is Morgana, the Witch of Eyes. And now while the Witch searches any of the Morganite spell cards, which is amazing, but her effect will allow you to drop the opponent's attack down to 0, thus allowing you to go for several OTK potentials, which you're going to be seeing multiple times in the replays below. But the rest of the Morganite support is also important because we have 1 of the Time Tearing Morganite, 3 of the Succumbing Song Morganite, and then 2 of the Guilt Gripping Morganite. And now all these offer amazing effects between drawing multiple times, the double damage, double summons, which are also very important, but having the no tributes and no cost is essential in this deck. So whether you open a copy of the red or the green, it really doesn't matter because going through all 3 is something that this deck does very well, since the Succumbing Song and the Morgana both search directly from the deck any of the Morganite cards. So do keep in mind that the red can also search the Morgana, which is very important. But going into some of our tribute summon lines, we have 2 of Majesty's Fiends as well as 2 of Arc Lord Christia. Because once you have the Guilt Gripping that is activated, you are then allowed to summon monsters without having a tribute. So Majesty's Fiend cutting off all monster effects, as well as Christia allowing neither player to special summon monsters. And then for the players that have used Christia in the past, they will note that when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, it goes to the top of the deck instead. So then you're going to be drawing it for the very next turn. But with Time Tearing Morganite, you're going to be drawing 2 cards and having 2 summons. So the Christia will not be a dead draw in the future. So that is actually a very important point to note. And now, while Arc Lord Christia and Majesty's Fiend are the main go-to stun cards for the Morganite package, another archetype that we've added in and has been showing a lot of consistency and promise is the Primite package. And now I know this could be a little pricey in the TCG, but especially if you're dueling electronically, this is definitely a archetype you want to be including in a lot of the decks, because we have 3 Primite Lordly Loads, 3 Primite Ether Barrel, as well as 1 Primite Drill Beam, which, as we know, it's the best card in the game right now, so having access to Drill Beam is really good. But our vanillas also offer a bunch of damage because we have the Blue Eyes White Dragon as well as Cosmo Queen. And if you're asking why we're choosing Cosmo Queen, wait until we go into the side deck and you will know the answer to that. But the Primites have been offering a level of interruption that we are just in love with, as well as they add resource and consistency. So not only does Drill Beam just offer that extra level of interruption, and again, just the best card in the format right now, but every turn you have Primite Lordly Load pumping out a monster, and then the Ether Barrel returning to the hand and resetting that Drill Beam. So as we know, Morganites are amazing going into the future turns, being able to draw multiple resources and summon multiple times, and then the Primites offer another level of recursion that when combined with the Morganites, honestly, it's a match made in heaven, and that is why we're seeing so much consistency between the 2. But wrapping up with the last engine, which honestly I have fallen in love with, especially when you combine it with the Succumbing Song Morganite, and that is 2 Eldritch the Golden Lord, as well as 2 Delta of Invitation. And now I know this might sound a little crazy, but do hear me out. While you activate the Delta and then send the Eldritch, you're then utilizing the Eldritch to be able to summon itself back, have 3500 attack, attack twice, and then deal double damage. And a lot of times, as you will see in the replays below, this is game ending a ton of times. This steals so many matches, and when you combine this with the Morgana's effect to drop the opponent's attack to 0, this is an easy GG and steals many games. But now going to our consistency, we have cards like 1 Terraforming because it searches the Delta, as well as one of our side deck cards. And then we also have 1 Pot of Prosperity because it is amazing, as well as 2 Pot of Extravagance. And you know those are the Golden Lord ones because that alt art is just too good not to be using in this deck. And then we also have the all-important Triple Tactics Thrust out of 1 of, as well as a single Triple Tactics Talent, because having these cards as a follow-up are just too good in the metagame. But the next card is the best consistency in the deck, and that is a 3 of, and that is 7th Tachyon. And now I want to say that 7th Tachyon is amazing in all the Morganite decks. So whether you're playing this or a variant of Stun, this card is something you definitely need to be looking into. Because in this deck alone, the Tachyon searches the Morgana, it searches the Ether Barrel, it searches the Christia. All of these things are super important. And then again, in the side deck, we have more cards that it searches, such as Light and Darkness Dragon. But if you're playing a stun variant of this deck, you can also search things like Inspector Border or even the Fossil Dyna. So 7th Tachyon in the Morganite package is almost a must-have, because by simply including the Masquerade, Giant Hand, or the Tachyon into the extra deck, the 7th Tachyon opens up all sorts of potentials that this deck can go into. So again, this is the most important search card in this deck. And I know it's kind of pricey in the TCG, but for online, it is a must-have when playing any Morganite build. And just for those that are not aware, I'll do a very quick example of how 7th Tachyon is amazing, essentially by revealing any number monster from 101 to 107 if it shares the same ranked level, attribute, or type as one of your monsters in your deck. You essentially can search it. So with the Tachyon Dragon, you can search Christia because it's an 8 to that rank 8, and then it's a light to the light. Or whenever you have the Giant Hand, since it's a rank 4, you're looking for a level 4 monster. And then that Fossil Dyna is an Earth for you stun players out there. But the Ether Barrel in this deck is the Earth, so it's a searchable target. As is that Morgana because the Masquerade is a spellcaster. But it's also a rank 4 light, so it does search the Inspector Border for the stun players out there. So for all these targets, 7th Tachyon is an easy addition to the Morganite deck. So wrapping up with the main deck, we have some very important interruption, such as 3 Infinite Impermanents, 3 Forbidden Droplets, or even the one of Called by the Grave. And as we know, Infinite Impermanence is just kind of one of the best cards in the game right now, easily one of the best hand traps, and since we can't use monster effects in the hand, very important to be utilizing here. And then the droplets, while comboed with things like the Morganites, since they're already going to be going to the graveyard, so you can use droplets, send them in the graveyard within resolution, and then negate monsters on the opponent's board, allowing you to go into your combos even further. So overall, having all the layers of interruption, whether it's the impermanence, the droplets, or even things like the drill beam, we're seeing that this deck has all sorts of ways to go first as well as second. And then either route you go, it puts a lot of pressure on the opponent right out the gate, because with the Ether Barrel setting up the Primite plays right off the rip, this is a lot of pressure that the opponents do not want to deal with, and they might even think you're on blue eyes right away. But then even with the Morgana, I know it's not potentially as strong, but it's setting you up with the extra normal summons, the double damage, and then the summons without tribute, so you can just slap down a Christia or a Majesty's Fiend. The opponent is going to want to have to do something right out the rip. So you're going to have things like the Thrust, like the Talents, or even the Called by the Grave active immediately. And then with the follow-up plays from the Primites or things like the Eldritch play, it's a lot going on right there. You will have plenty of follow-up plays no matter what the opponent has. And now moving into the extra deck, we do have a lot of doubles since we are running Pot of Extravagance, and that is double Utopia, double Utopia Prime, as well as double Utopia Lightning. And I want to note, if you slap down a Utopia Lightning, when you have the Succumbing Song's double damage effect, this does go for game quite often. And now I will say that these cards could potentially be cut for things that are more optimal on other engines, so that is definitely up in the air since these are not the ones we utilize the most, but having that option there was always very nice. And then of course you can't play the level 4s without the best rank 4 in the game, and that is double Baguska, the Terribly Tired Tapir, because having the Baguska is always important in today's metagame. And then going to our Tachyon targets, we do have double number 107 Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon, 2 of number 104 Masquerades, as well as 2 of number 106 Giant Hands. And again, the Giant Hand gets you things like the Ether Barrel, or it can search you things like the Fossil Dyna. Then we have the Masquerade, which searches into the Morgana, or for you players out there that are using the Inspector Border, that is something that you should definitely be looking into. And then with that number 107, that is easy access into things like the Christia, or even things like the Light and Darkness Dragon, which we're going to be mentioning very shortly in the side deck. And then the last card in our extra deck, and this is going to be a weird one and does kind of go into the combo with the side, and that is Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden. And again, it's kind of a weird one, so do bear with me on that. But moving into the side deck, where some of these tech choices will kind of be explaining themselves, we start with the first card, and that is Secret Village of the Spellcaster. And again, if you notice, in the main deck we run 1 Terraforming, 2 Delta, and then instead of just playing 3 Delta, we keep that Terraforming open in case we want to be able to search for that secret village. And then we also use Cosmo Queen in the main deck aside from the one of Blue Eyes White Dragon, so this is an easy side deck option for going first. And again, whether you open up the Cosmo Queen or have the Morgana on the board, either are spellcasters, so you can slap down the secret village, cut them off of all sorts of plays because you know you're going to have some interruption with things like the Drill Beam or even the Infinite Impermanence, and then your opponent cannot use spell cards. And then Morgana prevents them from attacking by banishing the Morganites from the graveyard. So they do very well working hand in hand. And now the second card in the side deck is 2 of Light and Darkness Dragon. And now we've mentioned this multiple times by going over some cards in the main deck, even the 7th Tachyon, but Light and Darkness Dragon, when you're going first, does absorb all sorts of resources that your opponent can throw at you. But this is why we do play the Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden in the extra deck, because if you're going first, a lot of times you'll be starting with the Morgana, searching you things like the Time Tearing for the double summon or the Guilt Gripping, so you don't have to tribute for the Light Darkness Dragon. But a lot of times, if you have the Morgana on the field with the Lad, and the Lad absorbs all the effects, they attack over the Lad, and then the Lad board wipes, it won't have a target to revive. So if you start with Morgana, do your search, and then link that into the Artemis Moon Maiden, then when you normal summon Lad, you will then be able to absorb a bunch of effects. When Lad is destroyed, you can then special summon back the Morgana from the graveyard, which will then search for another Morganite on summon. And then after that, you will have attack prevention by banishing Morganites as well. So this will set you up real good for turn 3. And a lot of times, this will mean you have 3 Morganites that are going to be in the grave or banished, and you will be well on your way to proceeding for OTK. Next up on the side deck is 3 Salesman, not only because I love this card and been hyping it up on the channel, but because hand traps suck. They really do. They hurt, they ruin everything. So call the Ash, call the Droll. When you open your hand, you will know which hand trap you do not want the opponent to be having. So shut it off right then and there. Or again, if you're going second, you can prevent them from playing monster effects on the board that are preventing you from going forward. So Salesman is definitely something to be looking into, because even if you call the hand trap, you won't have it in the deck for you to be able to not use a dead draw for the duration of the duel. And then after that, we're going to be going into our counter traps for if we go first, such as 3 Solemn Judgment, 3 Solemn Strike, and 1 of Solemn Warning, because we see how good the Dominus Impulse is right now. So I want to note, you could technically take one of these or 2 of these out for things like Dragon's Mind, because that is a very popular counter trap as well that resets itself. So I want to say, after some consideration, that is something that you could consider in this side deck. But the Solemn package, while going first, not only will you not pay because of the Guilt Gripping Morganite, but you're going to be insulating your back row or front row. Maybe you're going to be starting with things like the Christia or the Majesty's Fiend. You definitely want to make sure your opponent doesn't open up an Evenly, a Lightning Storm, or a Raigeki that will just ruin your day after you have such a great setup. So the Solemn package, definitely something we are considering in the side deck going first. And then that leads us to our last 2 cards, which are board breakers. But since we main thrust, we're citing these. The first card is Lightning Storm, and the second card is Evenly Matched. And a lot of times I will say, I think Evenly Matched is kind of rotating its way back into the format. Then Lightning Storm at 1, we could debate on that, but still right now we're going to be looking into searching it off things like Thrust and just cracking an entire board and just proceeding for a game. So overall, I have to say, I am in love with this deck. It has the perfect amount of stun, where if you set up the right board, the opponent will just kind of outright quick, and it has some teeth. So to the Morganite fans, I definitely recommend testing out Morganite Primite. Whether it's a build similar to this or your own homebrew, this deck is just way too fun, and I'm not too certain players are ready for what's going to happen when these Morganites hit the TCG. And if you have any text for the Morganite deck or something that you definitely think is just too broken with this build, definitely comment it down below. But most importantly, guys, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.